One thing that I just wanted to, I guess, preface the proposal with is, um, I'm new to this particular meet and confer process. I've handled negotiations for the firefighters for a while, but in terms of this process, I'm new to it. I was surprised, frankly, to see the disparity between Park Police, Airport Police, and the San Antonio Police Department. And part of my process representing these folks has been to try to understand why that disparity exists. And I still don't have a good answer to that question. I know at our initial meeting, I'd asked you, Sean, just, what is the real difference between SAPD and the Park Police? And I don't know that your answer really, satisfied me in terms of explaining why we have the disparity we do between these parties. What I think we're trying to do through this process is bring the Park Police and the Airport Police much closer to where the police officers for San Antonio currently are. And I think there are a lot of reasons to do that. From what I can tell, Park Police, Airport Police, they have the same chief of police. Chief McManus ultimately is their chief of police. In many cases, they're following the same rules and regulations as San Antonio police officers. They're working hand in hand with San Antonio police officers, making arrests the same way San Antonio police officers would, protecting the public in the same manner. Their budget, which used to be part of Parks and Rec, is now in public safety. It just, for all intents and purposes, feels like these guys are a division of San Antonio Police Department. Now, I know that's not the position the city takes. I understand that. But I don't understand how, when you're doing basically the same job, regardless of how you're labeled or what pot you're placed in, why you're not getting the same types of benefits. And so what we've tried to do today is bring these folks much closer than they have been in the past to where San Antonio Police would be. I don't think, the days of Park Police and Airport Police being basically glorified security guards is over. And I think it's important that we recognize the dangers and the commitment and the discipline that comes from these folks, these men and women that are out there protecting the city. So, with that in mind, like I said at the beginning, the idea is we understand, I'm not sure I understand why, but I understand that the city, at least at this point, is not willing to place Park Police and Airport Police under San Antonio Police Department contract. I remain confused as to why that is, but that's a policy decision the city has decided to make. It may change its mind at some point, or it may be forced to change its mind at some point. I really don't know. But at this point, I think the better process is to try to move Airport and Park Police to a place that recognizes the work that they do. And I don't think the current meet and confer agreement does that, frankly. And so hopefully the city will consider the proposal and we'll be able to move forward.
So we're going to give you guys our counter proposal today, but I want to preface it first with some comments. And first is that the city values you guys. The city values what you do. The city recognizes that the job you do is not the job of an ordinary city employee. We know you're law enforcement officers. We entrust you with decisions and powers that can affect the liberty of the city's citizens. And because of that, back in 2008, the city voluntarily, unilaterally, on its own, didn't wait to be forced to do so, agreed to adopt the meet and confer process for you guys. And, you know, you guys know the code. You could have forced a public election. We didn't do that. City council said, let's do this. And why was that? And that's to address the things that weren't working for you under the processes that apply to other non-police department city employees. And it seems, based on your presentation at the last meeting and honestly based on all the negotiations that we've done in the past, that the major concern to you guys is that what isn't working for you is that you're not on parity with the San Antonio Police Department. It's been a common theme in all of the negotiations, not just that, but the communications that we've had outside the process between the association and the city. And, you know, in a way, personally, I think that fails to respect the process that led to this point, both with SAPD and its collective bargaining agreement and adoption of 143, and with the process that has led us here to the meet and confer process. But the Park and Airport Police Departments are in fact not like the San Antonio Police Department. Qualitatively, you're hired differently, you're trained differently, you're promoted differently, and your operational mandate is different. So with respect to hiring, I mean, they test in, they have a comprehensive and intrusive background check, they submit to polygraph, they submit to a home visit, they take drug questions. They can only, you know, if they say that they've ever touched marijuana ever, they're disqualified. They don't even go back 2 years like the feds do. And there are different physical fitness requirements on entry, of course. Training, Y'all's Training Academy is a fantastic academy, but it's an orientational academy, in part because we understand you guys come into the department already certified as peace officers, but in part also because, you know, as a peace officer, you need to be oriented to what your mandate is as an airport or park police officer. So SAPD receives a different training. It's more relevant and broad in scope to address its broader mandate. Operationally, the city code limits your areas of geographic responsibility, and it also limits your function to a certain extent. There's four categories of functions that are listed in the code. That's assisting park visitors, providing information and related assistance. Second would be providing for safety and security of park visitors and users. And I'm not talking about airport here. I'm just going with the parks. The third listed function is to assist San Antonio Police Department as needed and as requested. Clearly a support role to SAPD. And finally, a more broad and general mandate, which is to carry out law enforcement responsibilities as are commensurate with your status as law enforcement officers. Now, to be sure, your officers often do some of the same things that SAPD does. And I think that the last two mandates, to be sure, in the city code pretty much guarantee that that's going to happen. But since 2013, all of your officers under the age of 45 have had the ability to avail themselves of all of the benefits and working conditions of SAPD, but only a couple of them have done that. And that's meaningful to but I think that part of it might be the actual quantitative difference in the departments. And I have some figures, and I don't know how accurate they are. But the figures that I have suggest that Park, on average, well, in 2018, averaged about 100 calls annually per officer. That actually is for more than parks. That includes airport. That's dividing all calls by 200 officers. Understand airport doesn't take calls like you guys do. So taking out the 50 or so airport officers, using round numbers, I came up with about 130 calls per officer per year for parks. For SAPD, that number is about 670 calls per year per officer. And keep in mind that the number I used in dividing the number of PD calls to determine that annual number of per officer calls, I used 2,200 PD officers. You guys all know that it ain't 2,200 who are taking those calls. It's the 1,100 or so patrol officers. And so if you use that as the denominator, I guess, in the fraction, you come up with, I don't know, 1,300 or so calls per officer and per year. And with respect to arrests, I'm using a number that Sergeant Adams came up with. You guys made 596 felony arrests in 2018. That's about 3 per officer if I include both departments. But if I only include 150 officers, that comes out to about 4 felony arrests per officer per year. That same number for SAPD is about 8, which actually kind of surprised me that it was so low. But it was 8 using 2,200 officers, and of course it would be about double that if we only used the patrol division as the appropriate comparator. So that's when you ask, and I know you weren't satisfied with our initial explanation about why these departments are different, and I hope that goes, to some extent to help explain why the city thinks that there are quantitative and qualitative differences.